Audio. Sir, welcome you, sir. Sir, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
So welcome you, sir. On behalf of the department, I wholeheartedly welcome you, sir.
Thank you. So it will take some time to start?
Or within a couple of times, sir.
Okay.
Sir, shall we start our program, sir? Start பண்ணிடுங்க. Shall we start our program, sir?
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
இல்ல இது எக்கனாமிக்ஸ்.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning to one and all present here and online. First, let me introduce myself. I am Sadiq Ahmed, Assistant Professor, Department of Business Economics, the New College Autonomous Chennai. I will be responsible for hosting this presentation today. On behalf of the department, I welcome you all for today's program. Technology-based startups and the ecosystem in India. There are more than 500 participants registered for this program, so we are unable to conduct on Zoom platform, so YouTube link has been provided for the participants to join. Let us start today's program with an invocation by Shaul sir. I request Mr. M. Shaul Hamid, Assistant Professor, Postgraduate and Research Department of Economics, the New College, to recite few verses from the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد صدق الله العظيم. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. I am delighted to invite Dr. M. Fakir Ismail, Assistant Professor, Postgraduate and Research Department of Economics, the New College, to welcome the elite gathering.
Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon to everyone. The New College, Department of Business Economics Shift 2 organizes a national level webinar on technology-based startups and the ecosystem in India. For this webinar, on behalf of Department of Business Economics, I wholeheartedly welcome our chief patrons, respected chairman, respected honorary secretary, respected treasurer of the new college in absentia, and I wholeheartedly welcome our patrons, principal of this college, Dr. S. Bashir Ahmed sir, Vice Principal Academic, Professor S.A. Sheikh Mohammed sir, Vice Principal Admin, Dr. V. Kamal Nazir sir, IQC Director, Dean of Arts, Dean of Research, for welcoming for this national level webinar, sir. On behalf of Department of Business Economics, I wholeheartedly express the resource person for this webinar, Professor M.H. Balasubramania, Department of Management Studies, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, Karnataka, for this webinar, sir. And our conveners, respected head of the Department of Economics, Dr. S. Karimullah Bashar, sir, and Dr. A. Abdul Rahim, sir, coordinator shift 2. So organizing secretary, Dr. B. Muhammad Rafi, and the organizing committee members of this webinar, and participants from various institutions in and around the country. Once again, I welcome you all with pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful welcome address. I am privileged to welcome our dynamic Vice Principal, Sheikh Mohammed sir, to deliver the presidential address.
Assalamu alaikum and very good evening to one and all present here. It's indeed a great pleasure for me to be part of this program. It's a very important program. Startups. I mean, India in the present time, more than now in the last few years, more than 60,000 startups been established in this country, and of that, many are technology-based startups, and they are doing very well. In fact, no, this is the time for us to think about all these things, and the Department of Business Economics, they have timed the program in a very nice way, and also they have got a very good resource person from Karnataka, Dr. M.H. Balasubramania, from the Department of Management Studies, Institute of Science, Bangalore, Karnataka. So he has a lot of experience, and he'll be able to share a lot of ideas to all our participants. See, in fact, no, I would like to tell you one or two things about the topic. In fact, in our country presently, almost every day, many startups are being established in this country, and some startups are doing wonderfully well. So definitely, you must be aware of these few startups which I mentioned here. Unacademy is one. This is an educational startup company, and they are doing very good. And in the financial sector, Cred, Razorpay, these are the companies which were launched very recently. And Cred, I remember, it was launched a couple of years before, and now they are a leading financial service provider. So in this way, they are doing wonderfully well. Only thing is, we need to have the idea, and we need to know how to establish a startup, and what are the benefits and advantages that are involved in establishing a startup. And these are all possible only when the system is proper. That is, when you have a right system favorable for establishing a startup, then only it is possible. For that, you have to do a lot of survey and so on. And our speaker of today's webinar, Professor M.H. Balasubramania, will be able to tell more interesting facts on this particular topic. I wish all the department all the very best, and also all the participants to get wonderful knowledge out of our resource person. Thank you very much. All the best for the program.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I request Dr. A. Abdul Jamal, Assistant Professor, Postgraduate and Research Department of Economics, the new college, to introduce our resource person.
Assalamu alaikum. Very good afternoon. On behalf of PG and Research Department of Economics and Business Economics Shift 2, I take this opportunity to give a introduction about Chief Guest. Our resource, today's resource person, Professor M.H. Bala Subramania sir, is a professor of economics at the Department of Management Studies, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, with a vast experience of 25 years of teaching and research experience. SAR's specialization is in goes like industrial economics, and SAR has published a primary research interest confined to industrial economics, covering wide spectrum of industry, startups, micro firms, SME, large-scale enterprises, including TNCs, their structure and growth, industrial R&D and technological innovations, entrepreneurship, industrial energy, consumption, pattern and efficiency, industrial subcoding, and productivity and industry performance. SAR has published more than 110 research articles in highly impacted journals, indexed in Scopus, Web of Science, and Clarivate Analysis. Along with this, SAR has published 16 books and have completed 14 major research projects. And unfortunately, and SAR has guided more than 18 PhD scholars having membership in various professional bodies and consultancies. With these few words, I once again welcome each and every one of this webinar. Now I'll hand over the session to the Professor M.H. Balasubramanian sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I am honored to request Professor M.H. Balasubramania, Professor, Department of Management Studies, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, to deliver his presentation. So I think you're on mute, sir. Excuse me, sir. Professor. Sir, please unmute yourself. Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. Sir, you're on mute, sir. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, I am unmuted. Unmuted.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
You are able
Thank
to
you.
okay. You are able to see my PPT?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, yes. Sorry for the initial disturbance.
No.
Thank you very much for inviting me as the webinar speaker for this national webinar. I'm grateful to the Department of Business Economics, the New College, Chennai. Now, for the next almost 1 hour, I would like to devote attention to the title of my topic, that is tech startups and their ecosystems in India. Because tech startups, as already told by your principal, that they hold immense potential for transforming our economy in terms of, particularly in terms of employment generation and income creation. So let me focus on that. So broadly, what has been observed is, in the recent period, tech startups and their ecosystems both are attracting increasing attention of both policymakers and empirical researchers across the world. Now, there are certain reasons why these startups and their ecosystems are attracting increasing attention. Now, tech startups are attracting increasing attention primarily for 3 reasons. Let us understand what are these 3 reasons. Reason number 1, as I have already told you, they have the potential to transform an economy or transform the structure of an economy through their contributions to employment and products and processes through innovations, contribution to productivity growth, contribution to income creation, and even exports. Because they have the potential to make multifaceted contribution, they are attracting attention. Secondly, tech startups are in fact emerging rapidly in different locations, particularly in the developed world and in emerging economies like India. Thirdly, though tech startups are emerging rapidly, they're also failing rapidly. In fact, according to the statistics, about 90% of the tech startups, they fail within the first 5 years of their emergence. Now, this holds good in the Indian context as well. So it is due to these 3 reasons that tech startups are attracting increasing attention of policymakers on the one hand and empirical researchers on the other. Now let us focus on their ecosystems. Now ecosystems are attracting attention because a tech startup has a higher chance of early emergence, early stability, and early success if it is inserted in an entrepreneurial, a productive, vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem. The probability of early emergence, the probability of early stability, the probability of early success increases rapidly if a startup is located in a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem. Secondly, in fact, ecosystems are emerging rapidly all across the world, particularly in the developed world and in the emerging economies. Thirdly, tech startups thrive primarily in certain locations and regions, which offer conducive environment for their emergence, sustenance, and growth. And if you closely observe, all such locations or regions are identified with the presence of a favorable entrepreneurial ecosystem for tech startups. So it is due to these reasons that tech startups on the one hand and their ecosystems on the other attract increasing attention. Now, precisely for this reason, business researchers quite often argue that fostering or encouraging or nurturing entrepreneurial ecosystems is a prerequisite for nurturing tech startups. If entrepreneurial ecosystem and startups have to be promoted on a large scale, then it is very much essential to understand its basic requirements. Now, before understanding what are these requirements, let me define startups. We all know startups are new ventures without any previous history of operations. And quite often they are started on a small scale with limited resources relative to medium and large scale enterprises. In other words, you take any startup, it would have been started on a small scale and their resource capability is very much limited. And they also, because of these reasons, they suffer from the liability of newness. But what I have observed is some startup owners, they try to overcome the liability of newness by projecting their industry background on the one hand and by projecting their educational background on the other. What I mean is, let us say, graduates who have emerged from IITs or IIMs on the one hand, and graduates who have joined multinational corporations, worked there for a couple of years, earned adequately, when they set up a startup, they prominently project their educational background and their industry background, which helps them to acquire resources, to reach the market, or to acquire the market, to acquire the human resources. But startup owners who would have emerged from lesser known institutions with lesser known companies, for them, raising resources becomes a formidable challenge. Reaching the market or penetrating the market becomes a challenge. Attracting good talent as employees becomes a challenge. So these are the key problems of startups in general. Now, startups in terms of age, according to Kaufman Foundation of the USA, startups are new ventures which are not more than 1 year old. So beyond 1 year, Kaufman Foundation will not consider that an organization or entity or enterprise as a startup. But if you look at business research, the business researchers, they have defined the age of startups in a range of 1 to 8 years in different contexts. It all depends upon the research context of the researcher. But in the Indian context, now startups have been defined in terms of age as 10 years. I'll come to that a bit later. Now, earlier I have told you that startups are new ventures without any previous history of operations. Now, to substantiate that, the third statement is valid. Startups, they do not include enterprises that are taken over by new management or inherited from by the new generation from the older ones. And they also do not include spin-offs which would have emerged from large enterprises directly or indirectly. Because please note, large-scale enterprises, including multinationals, they have the tendency to promote new enterprises from their from the company to reach their own, to achieve their own objectives. Such they are called spin-offs. Such new enterprises are called spin-offs, which are not startups technically. Then what's a tech startup? A tech startup may be defined as a new venture which owes its origin to science or technology-based entrepreneurship, irrespective of whether an entrepreneur promoter is qualified with a science or technology degree or not. But the most important distinguishing feature of a tech startup is this: they are technology, knowledge, or innovation-based with no predefined product and no predefined market. These are the two most important distinguishing features of a true tech startup. They must not have a predefined product. They must not have a predefined market. That is precisely why every startup owner has to ideate, or after ideation, they have to move to the proof of concept. They have to develop a prototype. They have to develop a minimum viable product. Then they have to work for product market fit by identifying the appropriate market. That is precisely why a tech startup actually at the outset would not have defined its product, would not have identified its market. It is not like setting up a new bakery. It is not like setting up a new fabrication unit. It is not like setting up a new sawmill. It is not like setting up a new machine tool enterprise, or it is not like setting up an auto component enterprise. In all such cases, please note, product is predefined, market is pre-identified. In other words, in both cases, that is, in such cases, both products and markets are identified and defined appropriately at the outset. But for a true tech startup, both will not be there, wouldn't be there. So broadly, tech startups are those which emerge from high technology industries as classified by the North American Industrial Classification System codes. So I have listed out these industries as now identified by the author Liu and others. Now it is published in a research article in 2014. High-tech manufacturing industries, there are 10 here, and high-tech service industries, there are 9 here. So any new venture which would emerge from these 19 classified industries and services would be called a tech startup. Now, when I mapped them according to the National Industrial Classification 2008, this is India's NIC. Now, I could identify 3 industries under the industrial sector, and 2 under the services sector. Manufacturing industries under, so three manufacturing industrial classifications are considered here. Manufacture of basic pharmaceutical products and pharmaceutical preparations, manufacture of computer, electronic and optical products, manufacture of air and spacecraft and related machinery. And when it comes to services, motion picture, video and television program production, sound recording and music publishing activities, programming and broadcasting activities, telecommunications, computer programming, consultants and related activities, information service activities, and scientific research and development. So a new venture which would emerge from any of these classified industries would be called a tech startup. But a startup in India, as defined by the Department for Promotion of Industry and International Trade, it has 3 important conditions or dimensions. One is it should not be more than 10 years old from the date of incorporation. Now, if provided it is incorporated as a private limited company under the Indian Companies Act 2013, or a registered partnership firm under Section 59 of the Partnership Act 1932, and or it is registered as a limited liability partnership firm under the Limited Liability Partnership Act 2008. Secondly, it's the turnover of the entity for any financial year must not have exceeded rupees 100 crore. And thirdly, the entity is working towards innovation, development, or improvement of products, processes, services, or if it's a scalable business model with a high potential of employment generation or wealth creation, provided that the entity is not formed by splitting up or reconstruction of an existing business. That means, again, here in this context, our earlier description that a tech startup or a startup is a new venture without any previous history of operations holds good. However, I would say broadly, the startup definition of India is it's in a more diluted manner. It is in a more diluted manner. Now, let me go ahead. Now, having said that, now we need to understand, why do startups emerge? Now, I have listed out here 5 reasons. All the 5 reasons are important, but they are not like watertight compartments. There could be some kind of an overlapping. One, as a means of livelihood. When I say startup, to clarify my intention of identifying these 5 points, one need to understand, suppose somebody starts a new venture in rural India. Now, a new venture, maybe it may be a bakery, it may be a sawmill, it may be a rice mill, it may be an oil mill, right? Any such enterprises started by, let us say, a youngster who is from an agriculture family, strictly speaking, we may call it a startup, not a tech startup, a startup. So in many such cases, they diversify. That is, in rural India, it is quite common, economic diversification. From the agriculture families, youngsters, they move away from agriculture. They start their own new enterprises. In most of such cases, they would have diversified primarily as a means of livelihood. This is one thing that we need to understand. Secondly, startups may emerge even due to policy inducements. Now, these startups are mostly in the form of micro enterprises, and they may be attributed to the policy incentives and benefits provided by the Government of India under the MSMED Act, that is Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Development Act. So due to policy inducements, startups can emerge. Third one, in response to the needs of large firms. In fact, if you trace the history of many of the micro, small and medium enterprises which are operating out of large cities or even medium-sized cities, which are very closely in relationship with large firms, if you trace their origin, you would know that some of the earlier employees of these large enterprises, they would have quit their job and they would have started these MSMEs. And they have set up these MSMEs knowing pretty well that the large firm which they served earlier will definitely develop business relationship and procure their output on a medium to long-term basis. So in response to the needs of large firms, startups can emerge. And one may start, new startups can also emerge due to market opportunities perceived by a new entrepreneur. But last one is the most important one, where tech startups largely come due to innovative ideas based on the knowledge acquired and the experience gained. In fact, I would like to draw your attention to some of the large companies in cities like Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta. You will see that youngsters who would have served Accenture, companies like Accenture or Flipkart or Amazon, or let us say Google, they, based on the work experience gained, based on the knowledge gained, based on the interactions that they would have had with their colleagues, with their superiors. Now they quit the company, they initiate their own startup. It's a typical tech startup, what I mean. So it is these kind of tech startups which actually hold promise for the future of our country. So these are the 5 important reasons for which, due to which startups may emerge from time to time. However, the rate at which startups emerge, the rate at which startups stabilize, the rate at which startups scale up and grow would depend upon 2 important reasons. 1, they are internal to the firm or enterprise. 2, they are external to the firm. In other words, given the internal factors, it is the strength of the ecosystem or environment in which they emerge and grow that would largely determine their success. Precisely for that reason, we need to understand what the term entrepreneurial ecosystem. So an entrepreneurial ecosystem, broadly, it is defined as a set of actors and factors coordinated in such a way that they enable productive entrepreneurship within a particular territory. This definition is pretty meaningful. It involves actors on the one hand, and it also involves factors on the other. And they are all coordinated in such a way that they encourage the emergence of productive entrepreneurship within a particular territory. Precisely for that reason, ecosystems, we call it, it is invariably regional in character. So entrepreneurial ecosystems are invariably regional in character because regions, they differ in terms of policies, regional policies, in terms of culture prevailing there, in terms of concentration of enterprises, particularly large enterprises, in terms of institutions, in terms of market size, in terms of quality and quantity of human resources, in terms of the availability of finance or sources of finance. All these together determine the strength of an ecosystem in a particular region. And please note, till 2010, empirical discussion on entrepreneurial ecosystem primarily confined to only 2 startup ecosystems. One is Silicon Valley in the US, and the other is Israel, but it is not anymore, right? Because new entrepreneurial ecosystems are fast emerging across the developed world, as well as in emerging economies like India. Now, among the emerging economies, India is recognized as one of the potential sources of tech startups, right? Because we have a huge force of S&T personnel, S&T institutions, and India is attracting more and more FDI over a period of time. In other words, more and more multinational corporations are emerging, are entering into the country, right? Government is liberalizing the policies, right? Educational institutions are improving their infrastructure, their R&D infrastructure. Due to all these reasons, now, even in India, India is considered to be a hotbed for tech startups. Now, but if India has to accelerate the rate of emergence and growth of tech startups, it is absolutely essential to explore and define an appropriate entrepreneurial ecosystem for tech startups for its nurturing across the country. Now, it is with this reason that we actually carried out a research project at the Indian Institute of Science funded by the Department of Science and Technology. Now, as part of that project, I did an intensive literature survey focusing on entrepreneurial ecosystem, the actors and factors involved in the ecosystem. And that enabled me to identify 12 decisive factors, and define the role and importance that they hold. Now, the first one, of course, is entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is at the core of the ecosystem for birth, growth, and exit of startups. Unless and until there is adequate amount of entrepreneurship, startups are unlikely to emerge, unlikely to grow, and unlikely to exit. So entrepreneurship is at the core of the ecosystem. Then second one is market. Market one, when we say market, it would include what we call early product adopters, repeatable customers, market networks, and even large companies, particularly multinational corporations. This is what the literature says. Then finance, please know it is finance for micro, small and medium enterprises. The sector as a whole depends on the banking system. But for startups, there's a new crop of investors who have emerged and who are growing rapidly. And even from outside, we attract these fund providers. They are angel investors or high net worth individuals, alternatively they are called. And there are venture capitalists, there are private equities, there can be public capital markets for IPO and debt instruments. Of course, of late, even some of the banks have started lending to startups. But from the literature, I could identify angels, private equities, venture capital, and of course, the public market for IPO and debt instruments. And as well as human resources is the other factor. That's because they need labor force, they need a technical workforce, and they need managerial talent as well. Then education and research institutions, because educational institutions, they produce non-graduate and graduate workforce, that means human resources, technical and managerial talent, that means the sources of entrepreneurship, and they also encourage or generate innovations. They provide entrepreneurial training. That is why educational institutions, higher educational institutions, they hold an important, they play an important role. Then government at the local level, at the regional level, and at the national level, they play an important role, because ultimately it is a government which frames the laws and regulations, for tax incentives, for registration, for operations, and even it defines the very concept of tech startups. It also frames laws for venture capital, entry and operations. It frames laws relating to bankruptcy, property rights, labor, and exits. And it also encourages public research institutions or public R&D institutions. Then large companies, primarily MNCs. Large companies play multiple roles. One, as they act as customers, they act as sources of entrepreneurship, because employees who quit large companies, they become startup owners, and they also nurturers of startups through accelerators, sources of technical and managerial workforce, investors, technology providers, and they also acquire startups. So they have multiple roles to play. Then mentors or advisors. Now, please know these youngsters, when they jump into the fray to start up their own enterprise, to start their own startup, they look for technical advice. They look for business advice. So technical and managerial advice for startup creation, startup stability, startup growth, and exits actually are primarily driven by their mentors or advisors. Now, support institutions, when we say support institution, from the literature, what I gather, of course, it is much more, but here what I would like to mention at this context is accelerators, technology business incubators, soft infrastructure and hard infrastructure providers. Soft infrastructure, we mean professionals, mostly lawyers and accountants, because lawyers, they help in registration. Accountants, they help in financial account keeping. And hard infrastructure, telecommunication support, transportation, logistics are equally important. So support institutions play an important role. Then culture is extremely important, because unless apparently there is an entrepreneurial culture, startups are unlikely to emerge. So cultural support, tolerance of risk, tolerance of failures, support for innovation, creativity, drive and hunger for achievements, highest social status for entrepreneurs, respect for wealth creation. All these are together indicate the importance of culture. Then media, of late media, those of you know who have graduated 2 to 3 decades back, you would know that media hardly reported anything about startups. But today, most of the business dailies and even the other newspapers, they have devoted space for projecting startups, news related to startups. So publicizing startup creations, its prerequisites, support available, failure consequences, and achievements of success, all are provided or projected by the media. Then immigration of talent is equally important because they are the sources of entrepreneurship, sources of human resources, sources of advisors or mentors, sources of finance, support networks, etc. To quote a simple example, if you randomly pick up, say, about 100 startup founders in Bangalore, hardly 10% will be from Karnataka. That means more than 90% startup owners are likely to be from the rest of the country, right? So that in simple words signifies the role of talent immigration. Now let me go ahead. So then, based on that richer understanding, we interacted with about 80 ecosystem stakeholders in Bangalore and Hyderabad as part of the project. We adopted what is called Delphi technique. It's a consensus arrival method through multiple stage interactions. Now, let me not focus more on that methodology. Let me look at the issues that we have identified based on 3-stage interactions with the stakeholders of the ecosystem. Now, when I say stakeholders of the ecosystem, they included startup founders, they included venture capitalists, angel investors, private equity employees, they included business mentors, technology mentors, educational institution entrepreneurship professors, chiefs of TBIs, accelerators, right? So then, of course, multinational corporation chief executives, then government officials. So we covered these stakeholders mainly to understand how do they define an ecosystem, what are the components of what is the structure of an ecosystem, what role do they play in their startup life cycle. So that enabled us to define or identify 9 important critical issues and providers or supporters of these issues. So they enabled us to understand that sources of entrepreneurship is the first key factor. Second one is sources of finance. Third one is market support. Fourth one is human resources. Fifth one is support structure. Sixth one is mentorship. Seventh one is policy. Eighth one is conducive culture. Ninth one is supportive media. Now these, and of course here you see tech startups and prospective tech startups. So these 9 factors are provided by 1, tech startups and prospective tech startups, 2, large firms, it could be domestic large enterprises or multinational corporations, 3, educational research and educational research institutions, and 4, here government is the 4th one. Now, if I have numbered here, these numbers actually refer to the factors that we have identified here. In the sense, if you look at tech startups and prospective tech startups, they provide sources of entrepreneurship, 2, finance, 3, market, 4, human resources, 6, mentorship, 8, culture. They directly or indirectly promote entrepreneurial culture, and they also support media. The same holds good for large firms, including multinationals. But they, in addition to what startups provide, these enterprises, they also provide support structure in the form of accelerators and incubators. And if you look at educational institutions, I have numbered them here. And if you look at the government may not directly provide sources of entrepreneurship, but it provides 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That is 2, 3, 4, of course, government does not provide. 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, because government frames the policy. Government also influences culture and media. So what it actually means is the key factors of ecosystems are actually provided or supported by a three-way interaction as propagated by Ed Kovitz. Okay, he's a well-known business researcher from Stanford University. So there, because if you see here, large firms and startups, they come under industry, educational and research institutions. They represent academia, and government at different levels. They represent the government broadly. So that means university, industry, and government, all the three, are their presence and their interaction ensures the emergence and growth of factors involved in the emergence and growth of an ecosystem, an entrepreneurial ecosystem. It is with that understanding that we formally define what is an entrepreneurial ecosystem in the Indian context. You see, here we have tech startups and prospective tech startups. That is the nucleus, because the entire ecosystem is led by them and driven towards the promotion of these startups. That's why they form the nucleus of the ecosystem. And there are 5 indispensable factors, that is sources of finance, market support, sources of human resources, support systems in the form of hard infrastructure and soft infrastructure providers, particularly accelerators, incubators, and even co-working spaces, which are thriving in India very rapidly, and mentorship, both technology mentorship and business mentorship. Now, these 5 factors are called indispensable factors because they're absolutely essential. Without them, an ecosystem may not emerge. Even if an ecosystem emerges, it may not survive. Okay, even if it survives, it may not be effective. That's why they are considered indispensable factors. So that is the first layer. The second layer, it comprises 2 factors. One is supportive culture, second one is media. Now, they are not indispensable because even without them, an ecosystem may emerge. In fact, in the Indian context, all the startup ecosystems, they emerged with minimum involvement of media and with minimum supportive culture. In fact, both supportive culture and media grew along with the ecosystem. That is why I consider them supplementary factors. And you see, industry, academia, and government forms the triple helix base. And these arrows actually indicate interaction. There has to be constant interaction among all these factors and triple helices. Only then productive entrepreneurship will emerge on a continuous basis. So if you see the blue marked triple helix base, and here second layer, and this is the first layer, and this is the nucleus. Now what is important is what role these factors play over a period of time in the life cycle of tech startups. So the life cycle of tech startups can be broadly divided into 3. The first one is the stage of emergence. The second one is the stage of survival and stability. And the third one is the stage of success and growth. Please note, each and every tech startup need not go through all these 3 stages. It is quite possible that stage 1 may emerge and one may succeed rapidly and grow. In other words, one may simply bypass the second stage. It is pretty possible. Or one may emerge and fail there itself. Or one may emerge and then move to the stage of survival and stability and continue to be there, right? So all these are, and in some cases, it may survive for some years and then die down. Or one may emerge, one may survive and stabilize, one may succeed and grow and then exit the market due to acquisition made by a multinational company. So the first stage will be induced by the availability and quality of entrepreneurship and sources of entrepreneurship. If there are strong sources of entrepreneurship and high quality entrepreneurship is there, I'm sure tech startups will emerge more rapidly in such ecosystems. So the way entrepreneurs are able to give shape to their ideas and take it to the market would determine the second stage, right? The degree of stability and success achieved in the second stage would feed into the third stage. A tech startup may fail prematurely in the very first stage itself, or even before reaching the first stage, or struggle to survive and sustain in the second stage, but fail subsequently. or succeed and grow into the third stage and thereby go public or get acquired by another startup or a large firm. Please note, all these things have happened in the Indian market. Thus, failure of tech startups through either abortion of ideas prematurely or infant mortality or death of adults is a part and parcel of the different life cycle stages of tech startups. As I have told just now, broadly, major ecosystems in India have witnessed all the three stages of startup life cycle as of now. Now, that can be elaborated a bit more with the help of this figure. You see, there are three stages: stage of emergence, stage of survival and stability, and stage of expansion and growth. So what the stage of emergence, it primarily indicates ideation, moving to proof of concept, moving to prototype development, moving to minimum viable product, and then achieve the product market fit. Now, in this stage, the primary role will be played by accelerators, technology and business incubators, and co-working spaces. Of course, the objective of these three are entirely different. If there's any question, I will deal with that. Otherwise, I will not deal with right now. Accelerators are primarily, they are called corporate accelerators because mostly corporate enterprises encourage them. It could be Microsoft, it could be Google, it could be any other enterprise, or it could be Intel, it could be any large, or it could be even Infosys or Wipro. So they will have their own accelerators where they actually encourage youngsters, or encourage youngsters who have ideas or who have already developed products which are complementary to the business objectives of this large-scale enterprise. In such cases, to promote them on a rapid scale, they actually help them to accelerate their scale. Whereas incubators, these are mostly promoted by the government, but there are some private sector incubators as well. So they actually encourage from the process of ideation to minimum viable product to product market fit. And once they register, they move out of the TBI. But in some cases, incubators, they insist on registration first, and then they facilitate all the other processes. Then mentorship, both technology and business mentors play a very important role in enabling these startup founders from the stage of ideation to the stage of product market fit. And sources here, finance, mostly seed funders, and angels play a role here, and not the private equities or venture capital funds. Very rarely, early stage VCs you will find playing a role. Then market, you hear customer testing is important, and market identification, that is the stage where large firms. So large firms and even tech-savvy customers play a very important role. Then this is the stage where, in general, startups go for registration. So the formal registration actually marks the emergence of a startup. Then from there, they move to the second stage. It is here that they need to produce repeatable products, and they need to attract customers repeated. That enables them to stabilize, to earn revenue, okay, and even maybe cross the break even. So mentorship again plays a role because you may have to refine the product, you may have to redesign the product, or you may, based on maybe the customer feedback that we have provided. So in all these cases, both technology mentors and business mentors play a role. And sources of finance, angels may still continue to play a role, but early stage VCs play a very prominent role by providing finance. Then market penetration, again, large firms, even other startups and public consumers need to be there. Then human resources, here educational and research institutes, large firms, other startups, they provide the required human resources to startups in the stage of survival and stability. And once they cross this stage, they are ready for scaling up. Mentorship again plays an important role. And here late stage VCs, private equity funds, and investment banks, they provide finance and accelerated market penetration. Now they will look at the international market, or they may even enter in the international market. And human resources, again, educational, higher education institutions, large enterprises, and other established startups who provide them the much needed human resources. So that is how the three stages can be defined. Now, at the lower end, you will see factors which influence tech startups across their life cycle stages. Sources of entrepreneurship are needed are not just for the emergence of tech startups, they are needed even in the subsequent stages. In the sense, there is a possibility that a startup which has emerged and which has stabilized may enlist the support of more entrepreneurs. So the number of the ownership might increase due to various reasons. It could be due to skills which they initially did not have, so which are complementary to the skills that the existing founders have. So they may encourage the entry of more participants as owners. So sources of entrepreneurship is relevant for all the three stages. Then government policy for startups, for industry, infrastructure, and IP, they are relevant for all the three stages. Conducive culture is important for all the three stages, and role of media as supportive media also plays an important in all the three stages. Now, given the role of entrepreneurial ecosystem in the promotion of tech startups in terms of their life cycle, we need to understand what kind of strategy we need to adopt in our country if we have to promote tech startups in a big way. So that is where I have actually proposed a plan of action and made some suggestions. At the national level, we need to have a national advisory council. So when we say National Advisory Council, whom should be involved? There is AICT, All India Council of Technical Education, which is the apex academic body particularly for engineering institutions. And we have apex industry associations, particularly ASSOCHAM, FICCI, and CII, and also NASSCOM and TIE, that is the industry entrepreneurs. NASSCOM and TIE are more appropriate representatives for the startup group. And we have DPIIT, that is Department for the Promotion of Industry and International Trade. They should be brought together, but that is not enough. That only ensures that triple helix base for the National Advisory Council. But we need to have, in addition, representatives of financiers, then large companies, educational institutions, mentors, support systems. If we know all of them, then an exclusive focus of this advisory council must be on industry, institute, technology transfer, and innovation commercialization. So that must happen in our country in a big way. Most of you would know that majority of our higher education institutions, they do generate patents, but these patents do not cross the institutions. In the sense, this trend of patent commercialization is still at its infancy in our country. Now, so the role of the National Advisory Council should be primarily a policy formulation and policy direction body. Then at the state level, we need to have again, another level of another council where we should involve state level technological university representing the academia, state industry associations, and NASSCOM and TIE chapters. In fact, TIE chapters are there in all major cities like Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, Mumbai, Delhi, like that. So we need to involve TIE chapters in the respective states. So Directorate of Industries that represents the government, they should be brought together. The state level initiative must have members from the financiers again, large companies, including multinationals, educational institutions, mentors, and support systems. Now, this should primarily ensure policy implementation at the regional level. Policy that has been framed at the national level must be implemented at the state level with the direction of the state level council. But that is not enough. We need to go down to the district level. At the district level, we need to bring together education, engineering institutions located in district headquarters representing the academia and large companies, NASSCOM and TIE as far as possible, and district industries center representing the government. They should be brought together. Here, the objective should be to generate entrepreneurship as far as possible at the sub-regional level, which would sooner or later migrate to the nearby ecosystem. Because at the district level, it is very unlikely entrepreneurship may emerge, startups may emerge, but they are unlikely to remain there. They are very likely to migrate to a nearby tech startup hub. It could be Bangalore, it could be Chennai, it could be Hyderabad, it could be Kochi, it could be Coimbatore. So at the remote level, they may only emerge, but they sooner or later, they migrate to the nearby entrepreneurial ecosystem or startup ecosystem. But we need to have further promote going further, what we need to do is promote the already emerged major tech hubs, that is tier 1 cities already emerged with concentration of companies, concentration of startups. So you would know that there are 6 major tech startup hubs in our country, that is Bangalore, National Capital Region Delhi, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Chennai, and Pune. And identify other tier 1 and tier 2 cities for immediate similar capacity creation in the subsequent years. They may include Ahmedabad, Asansol, Kolkata, Jaipur, Lucknow, and Guwahati. Then tier 2 cities for similar city creation, similar capacity creation in the next 5 to 10 years. So Coimbatore, Kochi, Visakhapatnam, Bhopal. And tier 3 cities for future capacity creation, maybe in the next 10 to 15 years. I have listed out some major cities of our country. And then what we need to do is promote triple helix interactions at the district level, involving industry and engineering institutions with GICs as the catalysts, as the facilitators of this industry institute interaction. So at the district level, the only objective should be, or the primary objective should be entrepreneurship generation. So each district should have links with the nearby tech startup ecosystems for entrepreneurial nurturing, emerged locally or in neighboring districts or states. In fact, you would have read in the newspapers that a tech startup which might have emerged in smaller cities, they invariably migrate to larger cities like Bangalore because of the market size, market support that would enable their growth. So they migrate to favorable ecosystems which are located nearer to their location. So each tech startup ecosystem should have links with the other nearby tech startup ecosystems. So the objective is to transform India through accelerated employment generation and economic growth. So it should be something like this. The entire country, we should have ecosystems across the country, startup hubs across the country. And all these ecosystems must have connections. They must be interconnected, because see, today you should know that a venture capitalist may be located in Bombay, but her business relationship is not just confined to Bombay. They invariably move to Bangalore or Hyderabad or Chennai or Delhi as their business requirement warrants. Similarly, startups may emerge in Hyderabad, but then in one particular sector. But then if the ecosystem is not favorable to that sector, such startups are likely to emerge to another ecosystem, maybe Mumbai, maybe Chennai, maybe Kolkata, or maybe Delhi. So it's important to have ecosystems or startup hubs across the country with interconnections that would ensure large-scale generation of startups, large-scale generation of employment, large-scale generation of income, large-scale generation of even exports. Please note, I have come across several tech startups which have started exporting from day one, either exporting or obtaining business from day one. Some of the analytics startups, they succeed in obtaining business either from the US or from other parts of the developed world from day one. So they are called internationalized new ventures. So in the business parlance, right? So with that, I would like to summarize, right? Promoting, and these are the important points. Promoting an appropriate entrepreneurial ecosystem is a prerequisite for accelerating the growth of technology startups. Entrepreneurial ecosystems are essentially regional in character. To promote entrepreneurial ecosystems, it is imperative to understand its structure, its role with respect to different stages of startup lifecycle. Now, the structure of an entrepreneurial ecosystem for tech startups, it is defined in terms of a nucleus, and the nucleus comprises tech startups and prospective tech startups with a triple helix base. The triple helix base comprises academia, industry, and government. Now, it is surrounded by two layers. That the nucleus is surrounded by two layers. The first layer consists of 5 indispensable components. They are indispensable because without them, the ecosystem may not emerge. Even if it emerges, it may not survive. Even if it emerges, even if it survives, it may not succeed. It may not be effective. So, and the second layer comprises supportive elements. They grow along with the ecosystem. While the triple helix based interactions churn out various components, they also play a direct and crucial role in the promotion of tech startups. Now, the role of indispensable components is discernible and it changes from one stage to the other in the startup life cycle over a period of time. See, the role of supportive components is valuable all across the 3 stages of life cycle, and so is the role of the triple helix. Now, given the structure and role of entrepreneurial ecosystems, India should promote already emerged tier 1 city-based ecosystems, the 6 major tech startup hubs, which we have identified just now, and followed by ecosystems in tier 2 and tier 3 cities all across the country, very essential. Now, to achieve this, formation of a national advisory council, regional implementation authorities, and sub-regional entrepreneurship generation committees are absolutely necessary. So this will facilitate a steady acceleration of tech startups, resulting in increased employment generation, technological innovations, productivity growth, and income creation across Indian economy. In fact, in addition to that, tech startups also have immense potential to promote high-tech exports of our country. Suppose it happens, apart from income creation, apart from contributing to the enhancement of quality of life, standard of living of the common man, even the balance of trade of our country may improve considerably. So it is with these issues that I would like to conclude my presentation, but I'll be very happy to deal with any questions that you may have. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for an interesting talk. Truly, we are enlightened and we have gained so much knowledge today. Now it is time for an interaction session. In this regard, if anyone is having any questions, I'm sure Professor M.H. Balasubramania would be pleased to answer them. Yes, students and other faculty members, you may ask questions.
No questions? Feel free, any kind of clarifications or questions. Of course, I have deliberately avoided government policy because anybody can access it and read and understand. But there are other critical issues which are not easily available for reading or understanding. That's why I have primarily focused on the role of entrepreneurial ecosystems, which form part of my research. Yeah.
We have not got any questions.
Okay. We'll conclude.
That was the clarity of the speech. Yes, sir. Now we'll go for the vote of thanks.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Now I request Dr. B. Mohammed Rafi, organizing secretary of today's event, to represent the vote of thanks. Sorry, present the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon to one and all present here. It gives me immense pleasure to give the vote of thanks for this one-day national webinar on technology-based startups and the ecosystem in India. First of all, I thank our college management for providing this opportunity to organize this program, and wholeheartedly thank our principal, Dr. S. Bashir Ahmed sir. I thank our respected vice principal, academics, Professor Sheikh Mohammed sir. I thank our respected vice principal, administration, Dr. Kamal Nazir sir. And I thank respected COE, Professor Abdul Latif, sir. I sincerely thank our guest of speaker, Professor M.H. Balasubramania, Professor IISc Bangalore, for accepting our invitation despite his busy schedule and delivering a thought-provoking and encouraging session on startups in India. Sir, your thoughts have enlightened our minds and have shown us a new path. I profoundly thank our beloved head of the department, Dr. A.S. Karimullah Basha, sir, coordinator of business economics, Dr. A. Abdul Rahim, sir, and Dr. Jamal, sir, and Ismail, sir, for their timely support. And I thank our colleagues of our department for helping me in smooth conduct of this national webinar successfully. I also thank all the other faculty members of other institutions and students for their active participation. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you. Thank you.